The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty, Alba-TCP, held a meeting on Monday to evaluate the region's political situation in the face of international extreme right aggression. The scandal unleashed by the first investigations into the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, could lead to its permanent closure. British media Latin American far-right leaders among recipients of millions of dollars in aid. And the Israeli siege against the West Bank city of Jenin continues for the 14th consecutive day, leaving at least 25 dead to date. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty, Alba-TCP, held a meeting on Monday to evaluate the region's political situation in the face of provocations of the international extreme right. During the meeting, the bloc's head of state spoke out in favor of the respect for the human rights and dignity of migrant population and the defense of sovereignty and peace in Latin America and the Caribbean. For his part, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, stated that security organizations must be coordinated in order to dismantle, capture, and destroy human trafficking organizations. During his opening address, the Venezuelan president also highlighted the bloc's need to demonstrate its protagonist role in the struggle for sovereignty, dignity, and equality.
We need to demonstrate once again our capacity, the capacity of Alba to be at the vanguard of the struggles for sovereignty, dignity, equality, and the right to happiness, peace of our peoples.
In another part of his intervention, Maduro described migration as one of the highest priorities of the summit's debates and demanded that migrants be treated with respect to their human rights and urged to create the mechanism to fully integrate them into their countries of origin. Maduro also informed the bloc's bank proposal to create a fund to assist deported migrants achieve their integrations.
The respect towards our migrants, respect to their human rights and labor rights, and to ensure we need to ensure that they can come back to our countries in a dignified fashion so they become citizens fully integrated and fully productive in each one of our countries. The Alba Bank is making a proposal, namely to create a system of loan for reinsertion of entrepreneurial migrants with a fund, according to this proposal, $10 million, a roving fund to address partially this situation.
During his speech from Havana, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel denounced that Latin America and the Caribbean are under the constant threat by the United States government, which seeks to either dominate nations of the region or submit them to permanent aggressions.
Pero nosotros tenemos que tomar en cuenta que el tema no es solo Cuba.
But we have to take into account that this is not only about Cuba. The whole Latin America and the Caribbean are under that threat, and only with unity we can face the joint imperialist and oligarchic counteroffensive that supports that threat. It is impossible for us to forget the cases of interference that only a few years ago took place in our zone of peace, with plans that were both delirious as dangerous. Today the government of the United States pretends to define the alternatives open to our countries, which are either to subdue them or to submit them to permanent aggressions.
Likewise, the Bolivian President Luis Arce condemned the spread of hatred speech and xenophobia against migrants who have contributed to the development of the countries, both economically and socially.
Condenamos la propagación de discursos de odio.
We condemn the spread of hatred speech and xenophobia against those who have contributed to economic and social development in many countries. In this context, we join the protest of our brothers in Cuba against the Trump administration's announcement to convert the illegally occupied territory of the Guantanamo Naval Base into a detention center for illegal migrants. We cannot forget that the United States has a notable influence on the behavior of migratory flows in the continent as a result of its interfering policies and its arbitrary unilateral and coercive measures against our peoples. Migrants play a fundamental role in the development of their host countries, bringing most of the time huge benefits to them.
During his participation in the Alba-TCP meeting to assess the political situation in the region, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, said that the effects of the contradictions of global capitalism are reflected in the imposition of tariffs and taxes on developing countries.
It is manifesting itself through the impositions of tariffs and responses by governments to the impositions of tariffs. What we are seeing here will create further instability and contradictions in the global economy. And it is not going to be very easy for us in the developing world to cope with the knock-on effects of the contradictions of the nationalist factions of monopoly capital. Now, we have had, since the rise of modern globalization, we have had undercurrents of a reaction against a uniform global monopoly capitalism and the failures of that unified global capitalism, in fact, the impossibility of having it coherent, has brought about very sharply these nationalist factions, as for example, in the MAGA movement, but we see it to a greater or lesser degree in every single country in the developed world.
Bolivian and Latin American authorities gathered at the Paseo del Prado in La Paz on Monday to commemorate the 230th birthday of the great Marshal of the Battle of Ayacucho, Antonio José de Sucre. The heartfelt tribute was paid in front of the monument to one of the most beloved historical figures of the Grand Colombian countries. Bolivian authorities, as well as diplomatic personnel from the Venezuelan embassy and other countries, laid floral wreaths at the base of the monument to the man who proclaimed Bolivia's independence in 1926 and was its second president. Antonio José de Sucre is remembered as a hero of independence and a visionary leader who contributed significantly to the formation of the Bolivian nation. His legacy lives on in the collective memory of the country.
En Bolivia, este año celebramos.
This year in Bolivia, we celebrate the bicentennial of our independence and remember with admiration the great Marshal of Ayacucho, founder of the great Bolivian nation and its second president. In honor of Marshal Sucre, the constitutional capital of Bolivia was named after Sucre. Sucre's ideas are today more alive than ever. the construction of a state of institutions based on ideals, and the promotion of a Latin American unity as a challenge for the unity of our peoples.
Join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The scandal unleashed by the first investigations into the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, could lead to its permanent closure. British media, Latin American far-right leaders are among the recipients of millions of dollars in aid. Elon Musk, head of the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, has already administratively dismissed several officials who tried to block access to sensitive documents. The first revelations confirm the transfer of millions of dollars to alleged political leaders in Latin America to help migrants who are now being expelled by Washington in deplorable conditions. The British BBC network is also at the center of the controversy, having been found to have received funds from the U.S. agency, even though it is expressly forbidden to receive foreign funding. In this context, tech tycoon Elon Musk denounced that the United States Agency for International Development financed research for biological weapons such as COVID-19. Elon Musk exposed in his social networks that with tax money, the USAID helped to investigate and spread the pandemic that caused millions of deaths in the world. The tycoon also stated that the U.S. agency also contributed to the production of heroin in Afghanistan, accusing them of being a criminal organization. Musk accused as well the USAID of being linked to coup d'etat in Haiti, Ukraine, Egypt, and other countries in the world. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called on Canadians to boycott U.S. products and only buy national ones. The Prime Minister urged citizens to check product labels and choose products manufactured in the country, suggesting that whenever possible, choose Canada. Trudeau also called on Canadians not to vacation in the U.S., but to do so in Canada. The call aims to fight against the tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. According to information from the Oval Office, President Trump has scheduled a meeting with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and the Canadian Prime Minister. European Union leaders have further convened to respond to the U.S. President Donald Trump's threats. The 27 European Union members have met on Monday morning at the Royal Palace in Brussels. Briefings refer that the first part of the agenda will focus on geopolitics and relations with the U.S. They further recalled that U.S. President Trump announced to impose very soon tariffs on the European Union. The GOP head of state had justified such hostile policy by accusing Europe of taking advantage of the U.S. Moreover, the agenda includes both a meeting with NATO Secretary to discuss issues related to Russia and an encounter with British Prime Minister. The North Korean government condemned Monday the statements of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who called the nation a rogue state. Rubio's statements pose a serious political provocation willing to tarnish the image of a sovereign state. The North Korean administration ensured that Rubio had expressed the White House's incorrect view of the Asian nation. Furthermore, following the U.S. Secretary of State's remarks, the North Korean government stated that they will never help boost Washington's interest in the region. Meanwhile, U.S. experts had described Rubio's statement as reckless, especially since the U.S. president has designated Richard Grenell as his special representative for North Korea. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in the United States to meet with President Donald Trump. Netanyahu's visit comes at a time when the indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas are to begin in order to further define the truce agreement. Before traveling to the United States, Netanyahu assured that the war has served to change the face of the Middle East. The Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, and the liaison with the families of the hostages Galtrish accompanied the Israeli Prime Minister. The International Criminal Court said that U.S. authorities should arrest Netanyahu on charges of war crimes and genocide against the Palestinian people. The Israeli siege against the city of Jenin continues for the 14th consecutive day, leaving at least 25 people killed to date. Zionist forces blew up some 20 residential buildings in the eastern part of the Jenin camp in the occupied West Bank. Local authorities denounced that Tel Aviv is carrying out a campaign of forced displacement, which affects some 15,000 Palestinians. Authorities also warned that occupation troops have no respect for international humanitarian law, since their attacks also targeted health centers and members of the press who were covering the news. And for a second consecutive day, Israeli occupation troops maintained their military aggression south of the occupied West Bank town of Tubas. Between Al-Farah camp and the town of Tamun, the Zionist army raised the roads and infrastructure of both localities, blocking the access points with dirt mounds. Occupation forces also stormed and raided the homes of residents, forcing them to flee. In addition, Israeli forces detained more than 10 citizens between the town of Tamun and the camp, while bulldozers destroyed an aqueduct between the town of Tamun and the village of Atof. The Israeli occupation forces remain deployed at the Rafah border crossing to prevent the return of Palestinian citizens to the Gaza Strip. According to local authorities, Israel is not only preventing the return of Gazazi citizens to their homes, but is also blocking the departure of the wounded to medical centers and hospitals abroad, where they would receive medical treatment. In this regard, the activity at the border is limited to the departure of 100 patients and wounded in need of treatment in Egypt and 50 people in a humanitarian situation. The restrictions on the movement of the Palestinian population constitute a violation of the ceasefire agreement reached between Israel and the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, which entered into force on January 19th and consists of 3 phases, setting out a series of humanitarian and political commitments for both parties. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.